Three short compositions will be presented. The first one is Swan by French composer Saint-Saëns. The second one is Prelude in G by German composer J.S. Bach. And the last one, Adieu d'amour by English composer Elgar.
I first met Jean Smith in 1980 in New Delhi. I was on my way to Nepal with my wife to begin my doctoral research and had made an appointment to visit him in his office. While he was answering all my questions patiently and fully, I became aware of a rising sense of anxiety at the thought of having to be parted from this fountainhead of knowledge. After almost an hour, my well-brought-up wife pointed out that these were office hours, that Mr. Smith was surely a very busy man, and that he probably had other ways of spending his morning than in educating me. But before we left his office, he invited us to dinner that night, where I continued to pester him with my questions. With minor variations, this was essentially the pattern of our encounters for the next 30 years. When, recently, I heard the news that he had passed away, I experienced what no doubt many people in this gathering must also have felt: a combination of personal sadness at the death of a friend and a sense of public loss at the extinction of this beacon of knowledge. It felt as if a great light had gone out of the world. Whatever we may be told about the efforts being made to cherish and preserve Tibetan culture in Tibet, I, for one, suspect that if things continue as they are, within a couple of generations, dozens of minor and perhaps even some major dialects, most of oral literature, much of folk religion, and indeed anything of Tibetan culture that is predicated on a certain type of urban, agrarian, or pastoral lifestyle will be gone. And what is often brandished now as evidence of a flourishing civilization is nothing more than folklorization, the cultural equivalent of the undead. Tibetan literature is not coextensive with Tibetan culture, but it accounts for a very significant part of it, not least when we consider that Tibet is reputed to have the highest production of literature per capita of population of any civilization. In the dark days of the 1960s, Tibet's text-based traditions were themselves facing the spectre of extinction, and Jean's role in collecting and preserving whatever could be found is rightly legendary. The culmination of those heroic days is the extraordinary but modestly named Tibetan Buddhist Resource Center. Modestly, because it hosts a great deal that is not only Buddhist, but embraces many other domains of Tibetan civilization as well. Jean's personal qualities made him a perfect ambassador for his cause. His motivation was so obviously not the advancement of an academic career or personal interests. As you may know, there was a scheme afoot to secure for Jean an honorary doctorate at the University of Leiden, where he'd been a student, coordinated by our friend and colleague Jonathan Silk. The degree was never awarded. It was as if Jean had got wind of the plan and took his leave just to avoid having to make a speech and to suffer the ordeal of public accolade. His capacity for work was staggering and continued unabated in spite of his precarious and failing health. He reminded me of something Léon Blois once said about his friend, the ailing writer Villiers de l'Isle Adam. Villiers, he said, wrote the second half of his novel, The Future Eve, lying flat on his stomach. It is extraordinary how, with some people, the soul forms a right angle with the prostrate body. Buddhists believe that there are certain consecrated properties that can be given as special gifts. One of these is the gift of sacred teaching, to which Zenkar Rinpoche referred earlier. The character of such gifts is that they are given freely and unconditionally, with no expectation of return. A related Tibetan motif is that of the kindness, usually that of one's parents or one's teachers, that can never be repaid. Beneficiaries of the gift of teaching may also make offerings to their masters, but the point is that these offerings are not reciprocal. Sacred teaching is not bought. As one of the many beneficiaries of Jean's teaching, I would also have liked to give him something whenever I visited, but I could never think of anything that might please or interest him. My periodic humble offerings of clandestinely photographed texts were obviously not for him personally, but for the greater cause he served, and to feed the wonderful monster he'd created. This is the creation that survives him, and which he committed to the care of those best able to nurture it. Because, of course, that light hasn't gone out. And if we are here today, it's as much to pledge to keep that flame burning as it is to honor the man who set the match to the tinder in the first place and carried the beacon for the best part of half a century. Jean's namesake, the Catholic novelist Alice Thomas Ellis, once said, "There is no reciprocity. Men love women, women love children, children love hamsters." When I was last in New York, I came to Jean's office as I had done 30 years earlier in Delhi. I have a different wife now, but she's also very well brought up, and I was quite relieved when she and my daughters said they would go and visit some exhibitions. This little meeting with Jean turned into a 7-hour seminar, and at the end of it, he invited me and my whole family out to dinner. Alice Thomas Ellis was right. There is no reciprocity. But Jean understood that what goes around comes around. And he understood the injunction to cast your bread upon the waters, and to give and not to count the cost. Jean gave his life to the preservation and dissemination of the Tibetan repositories of the teachings of the Buddha. But the principles according to which he accomplished this would also surely have earned the blessings of other masters. Thank you.